Hi everyone, we're finally here. I'm Tom from Alter Ego Studios, and if you've been with us so far in this tutorial series, you'll know that we are basically showing you how to turn a 3D printed master into a wearable cowl. So if you want to know what we've done to get to this stage, you can watch the other two tutorials that have been done previously. But we're finally here in the real world after doing all the digital preparation work. So let's begin. In this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be assembling the shell around the master, and we're essentially going to be pouring the silicone to actually make the mold itself. For this, you'll need several different bits and pieces. So let's go through what we need. First of all, we've got the 3D printed master right here. It's just been printed in sort of draft quality, FDM printed. If you want to know how to make the master, watch one of our previous tutorials. The next item that you're going to need is your painted and finished and fully prepped master, which we'll handle and have a look at in a minute. What we're using in this tutorial are a lot of smooth-on products, and the reason we're using smooth-on products is because they're the best. Doing this can be very pricey, it can stack up pretty quick, and the last thing that you want to make is mistakes. So using smooth-on products really are the best on the market, the best that you can use anytime you want to be using silicons, urethanes, plastics, anything like this. I always use smooth-on just because it's reliable and it does what it says on the tin. In fact, very kindly, Bentley Advanced Chemicals have actually helped us out with a lot of this kit today. So shout out to them. In fact, very kindly, they've even given me a bit of Bentley Chemicals top right there. Nice little t-shirt. Thank you very much. So if you are in the UK and you're thinking about doing this, then basically look up Bentley Chemicals, Bentley Advanced Chemicals, and order from them. Speak to Len, who works there, is absolutely top guy. Totally recommend speaking to him. Totally recommend their products. If you live elsewhere in the world, like the US or any other countries, then just type in Smooth On and look for the distributor in your country. So what we're using right here is Mould Star 20T. That is the silicone we're going to be using. I like it because it's transparent, it's easy to add pigment to, it's got a low viscosity, which means it's quite runny, and generally I think it's a pretty good silicone to use. The other thing that we're going to be using is some universal mold release. We're also going to be using some Silk Pig. Now I've got two different colours here. These are pigments for silicone. Silk Pig White and Silk Pig Purple, both supplied by Smooth On. I've also got here a little couple of small pots that you can buy in their sort of rainbow trial kit of different colours of Silk Pig. I've got Silk Pig Green, Silk Pig Yellow, which we may use at some point. Next thing I have is this item right here. You don't necessarily need this, but it makes opening up the tubs a little bit easier, and you'll see why in a second. I've got some disposable gloves. These ones are natural latex, but if you're allergic to latex, then you can get something similar. Got these little things right here. Now, actually, these are kebab skewers, but they're paddle skewers, which are really useful for either stirring liquids together, or what I use them for is actually dipping into the Silk Pig and then adding the pigment to the silicone, and you'll see that in a second. We've got some soft brushes, a couple of different types. I've got some baby wipes just to basically have a bit of a cleanup of hands and things like this. I've got some talcum powder, which we'll need later on. I've got a glue gun with a couple of spare glue sticks right there. I've got some plastic cups right here. The reason I like to use plastic cups is because you can reuse them. They're quite easy. Once the silicone sets in there, quite easy to peel the silicone or the urethane out and reuse them. Some people use disposable paper popcorn buckets or paper cups and things like this. Use whatever you like. You just need something that basically is is easy enough to use, small enough that it'll fit into the vacuum chamber that you're going to be using later on. What I do like about the plastic cups as well is that you can actually see if it's mixed properly. So you can have a look at the bottom and make sure that the bottom is mixed when you're doing it. Learn at Bentley Chemicals has very kindly also let us have a few different smooth on tubs right here. So we've got some small, some medium, some large smooth on tubs, and some bigger stirrers right here, which I never saw in my life. In all the years of using smooth on products, never seen one of these until finally we got sent some. So I'm very grateful for these, very nice. The other thing that we have right here are some digital scales and of course a vacuum chamber. Our vacuum chamber is very well used and well loved indeed. Hopefully yours will be a bit cleaner than ours. So the only other thing that I'm going to use and need, which I suggest you do, is just a bit of cardboard. And what I like the cardboard to do is if I move some of this stuff out of our way, just over here, I like to mount everything on the cardboard so that when the silicone ends up dripping off the master onto the base that it's on, the cardboard is still relatively easy to move and slide around. The other two things I've got here that I think I skipped is some bolts and some wing nuts right there. And that is going to be used for bolting on the shell around the master once the couple of capturing layers of silicone have gone on. The size, basically you want something that's going to fit through and bolt up the other side and fit through the bottom and bolt up on the bottom. So these are about 3 centimetre long, but you could use longer. I wouldn't go any shorter if I were you. And the width of them is, these are M8s, and it doesn't matter what you use, but whatever you do use, you have to make sure that you've got the right size holes for it to fit through. So you can see the way that I've designed these bits of shell is I've designed it so that they fit through with a little bit of wiggle room. The last thing you want is to be having to put these on and having to be sort of hammering them through or forcing them through very hard. So little bit of wiggle room. In fact, I think they're M8s going through 9mm holes is what we've made them at. All right, so I think we're ready to crack on, and I think we're ready to do the first stage. Now, the very first thing that I would do is I would take these bits of shell individually, and what I would do is, because we're going to be pouring silicone into this shell around the outside of this master, last thing you want is for this shell to be very difficult to pull off. So I always like to basically lube up the inside of the shell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some universal mold release right here, give it a little shake, and I'm just going to give a little coating on the inside of all these little bits of shell. What that's going to do is it's going to ensure that when eventually we take the shell off the master when the silicone is set, that the shell peels off relatively easy. It'll never be that easy, but relatively. All right. And I'm only spraying the insides. I'm not going to bother spraying the outsides because the outsides aren't going to make contact with the silicone. And what I'm doing also is when I'm spraying, I'm making sure that I'm getting into these sort of flanges, into these nooks, these channels right here. And those channels are there to help the silicone flow down to the bottom of the mold more easily, but also to help the silicone eventually lock into the shell in place when the master's not there. And we talk about that an awful lot in the tutorials that we did showing you how to create this shell in ZBrush and how to prep the master. So I really do suggest you go back and watch those tutorials if you've got the time and the patience. All right, so sprayed the inside of those. So next thing that we need to do is we need to take our master right here, and one more time I'm going to pop it on the, I'm going to inspect it basically to make sure there's no debris, no dust, nothing that I need to get rid of. I did give it a bit of a clean. If it needs a clean, clean it with something like a microfiber cloth, a nice clean microfiber cloth all the way over. But this is looking pretty good to me. And it's going to move that over there. I'm going to move the silk pigs over here. Just cap that lid on. There we go. Let's pop that over there. So, as you can see, the reason that I like to put it on the cardboard is because it's going to be messy work. Now, when we paint on that silicone, what's going to happen is it's going to want to drip off down onto the sides, okay? And it's going to go onto the table. So first of all, make sure you're working on a table that has a sort of plastic cover on or something that is easy to either throw away or peel the silicone off, okay? It's messy work. The next thing is that silicone is going to try and act a little bit, it's going to be a little bit like glue. It's going to set, and essentially it's going to be hard to sort of rotate and move this thing around. So you want something that slides relatively easy over the table surface that you can put this on. If you want to, you can use a sort of like a turntable or something like this. People use like I think it's called a Lazy Susan or something like this you can use, but I like to use just a bit of cardboard because I can chuck it away easily enough afterwards. So just having a little inspection of this just to make sure there are no bits and pieces, no debris stuck to it. Everything's looking very nice. Everything's looking very crisp. Very nice indeed. All right, so first thing that we need to do is we need to do a couple of capturing layers, okay? Capturing layers of the silicone that's going to capture the detail before we put the shell on. You don't have to do this, but this is the way we do it. You know, in all of these videos, and I've said it before a few times, people might have different ways of doing things. There might be a better way of doing things. This is what works for us from all the experience we've had, from the multiple times we've done stuff like this, from masters of these arts sort of telling us their tips and tricks and teaching us, and also just what we've discovered through trial and error. So, and believe me, over the years, there's been a lot of errors. So hopefully you can learn from the mistakes that we've made so you don't have to make quite as expensive mistakes. So let's get back to this. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be essentially mixing up a small-ish quantity of the silicone so that we can basically paint it on with a soft brush, and we're going to try and basically capture all of the detail. So you can see there's quite a lot of sort of like honeycomb work here, quite a lot of detail, nooks and crannies that we want to get that silicone in. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix up the silicone. Now I like to see where that silicone is, and because this silicone here is transparent, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to see where it's actually gone and where it hasn't gone, and also sometimes a little bit difficult to see the air bubbles, especially on black. And you don't have to spray these things black, because whatever color it is going to be in the end defined by the pigment that you add to the urethane, whatever you're casting into the mold that we make. But I like to spray these black anyway to see what the end look is going to be like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my first lot of silicone a little bit of Silk Pig White, so that it's very easy going on over the black to see exactly where you've gone and where you haven't been. So let's crack this bad boy open. Here we go. Now, one thing that I would say, or bit of advice that I would give when it comes to smooth on products, is don't be afraid to read, okay? When you open up the products, the first thing that you're going to get are fact sheets like this. And you might stare at it and think to yourself, oh God, this is a lot. It's not a lot. Realistically, it's like one page back and front and back to read. And it's going to give you the information like the pot life, curing times, all of this lingo. Pot life is basically how long the silicon, you can stir it together and how long it will stay and live in that pot before it sort of starts to toughen up and firm up and go hard. That's its pot life, the life that it has in the pot before it starts to change. And then cure time is once it's on, or once that silicon is where it needs to be, how long does it take for that silicon to cure so that you can basically demold it and do what you want to do. Take the original or the master out of the silicon so that you can then use it. So as you can see, Moldstar 20T has a mixed viscosity of 11,000 CPS. That'll mean nothing to you, but if you Google CPS, the higher the number, the thicker it is, okay? So with this, we have a pot life of 6 minutes, and we have a cure time of 30 minutes. It's not a lot of time to work with, so you do need to work quickly with this stuff. That's all we really need to know for the moment, but I suggest that you read all of this. One of the other things is that this is a platinum cure silicon, right? Platinum cure silicons are inhibited by quite a lot of things actually, but one of the main things is sulfur. So with resin prints, things that have been printed in resin, 3D printer resin, 3D printer resin naturally contains quite a lot of sulfur. So it's always best to first of all make sure it is thoroughly cured before you spray it or do anything with it, and then to give it a spray with something like primer, sand it, make sure it's nice, spray with primer again, and then spray it black. So none of the silicon is actually making contact with any of the actual resin print itself, because if that resin print is even slightly uncured, the silicon unset, the silicon won't cure, and basically you'll have a big runny mess on your hands. So just make sure it's all thoroughly sprayed and it's been out in daylight or under UV light to cure for quite a decent amount of time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take this fascinating documentation. I'm just going to pop it elsewhere. There we go. And I'm going to take out my tubs. So what I have right here is one tub of Moldstar 20T Part A and another tub of Moldstar 20T Part B. And I need to open these babies up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my snips, snippety snip snip, and you can see that you've got these little lugs all around the outside, okay? So what I'm going to do is just where you've got these little rivets, I'm just going to snip underneath to loosen that tub up. If you're used to dealing with big tubs of industrial sort of glues or things like this, you'll be used to stuff like this. But for those of you just venturing into it, this is what you've got to do to sort of loosen it up and to open it up, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing with Part A. Open that up, snippety snip snips. All right, there we go. Then this is where this item comes in useful. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to use this to loosen up each of those flaps that we've now cut. And there we go, lovely jubbly. Put that over there. Just move that shell forward slightly. And let's do the same thing here. Let's open it up. Now, next thing I would advise doing, before doing anything else, when you open these tubs up, you want to give them a really decent stir. So I'm going to take 2 of these. Do not cross-contaminate. Do not make the mistake of using the same stirrer for this and then for that, because what you're doing is you're adding Part A to Part B and it'll start to make it set. It'll start to make it go off. You will waste the entire tub. So one in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spend a little bit of time just mixing this like so. Gently stirring around. Making sure we're good. Using our official smooth on stirrers. Very fancy, very fancy. Normally in the past I've used just normal paint stirrers. These are basically normal paint stirrers, but they've been stamped with the Smooth On brand, so it just feels that little bit more official. All right. There we go. Nice little stir. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape that off just like that. Just like that. There we go. Scrape that off. And I'm going to put this stirrer just in that little cup, because I'm going to save that for later. That's going to be good. There we go. Let's pop that just over. In fact, let's pop it just in the top there. Super duper. And then same thing with this one. Let's scrape it off. Just like that. So they are nicely mixed. Or basically anything that in the cold weather or anything that with it being in storage over time would have settled to the bottom will be nice and mixed in now. Let's take another one of these cups. There we go. Let's pop that in there. And then let's pop that just in the top there like that. There we go. Fantastic. All right. So next thing that we need to do. What I'm going to do is I am going to mix up, as a rule of thumb, you have to sort of use a bit of guesswork as to how much silicone you're going to need for your first sort of capturing layer on this. But I think I'm going to mix up about 200 grams of part A, 200 grams of part B, and put a little bit of Silk Pig White in there. Mix it up, stir it up. I'm going to put it in the vacuum chamber. I'm going to suck all the gas out and or suck all the air out of the silicone, de-air it, debubble it. And then we're going to start to basically coat this on and spread it on. So let's take one of these. I think we'll take one of the medium tubs. It's quite nice actually. On the medium tubs, it actually gives you measurements of mils, and it gives you measurements of ounces in there. But I'm going to do it by weight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that on the scales. I'm going to zero my scales, and this can be messy work. So I'm going to put on a couple of latex gloves. I'm going to roll my sleeves up. In fact, you know what? I'm not going to roll my sleeves up. I'm going to take my AE hoodie off so that you can see this fantastic Bentley t-shirt in all of its glory. Again, big shout out to Bentley. Absolutely amazing guys. Right. So let's pop these old latex gloves on. Be safe. All right. Let's zero that again. Zero those scales. That's right. Zero. And I'm going to start off by just getting the part B, and I'm going to pour 200 grams of part B. 200. Let's see, I'm up to 50. 100. 150. And getting this spot on is always impossible. Oh, look at that. 204 grams. 204 grams. So when I pour in the part B, I want to double that. So I want to be getting as close to 408 grams as humanly possible. So what I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to pour it in. And let's get up to 408. Oh, 403, just a smidge more. 405, 406, 408, bang on. All right. Scrape that into there using a different finger to the one that I used on the part B. Now, working quickly, let's take the Silk Pig White. Let's take one of these little sticks, give it a stir, and I'm just going to put a glob of Silk Pig White in there. I'm going to start to give it a stir around just to get the pigment in there. That's it. Scrape it off like so. Just pop that just in there. Fantastic. And then I'm going to take a fresh stirrer and I'm going to start to make sure that I really scrape everything off the sides and everything off the bottom of the tub to get in there. Now, bearing in mind the pot life of this is only 6 minutes. So, I've got 6 minutes to work. So let's not take too long. There we go. The good thing about putting in the Silk Pig as well is that when the silk pigment is a consistent colour in there, then you pretty much know that it's been stirred very well. Some people will say that you want to add the Silk Pig to the part B first. I prefer to add it at the end because adding it at the end tells me when everything has been very well stirred. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that back in there. I'm going to put it into my vacuum chamber. I'm going to put the lid on my vacuum chamber. And do you know what? I'm going to try and film this so I can show you what's going on in that vacuum chamber, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my vacuum chamber on. And I'm going to lock off the chamber, and you can see instantly the pressure gauge starts to go up like that. And as the pressure gauge is going up, you'll start to see bubbles appearing on the surface of that silicone. And if I keep an eye on it, as it goes up, you'll see that it's expanding more and more and more and more and more. And if it starts to come out of the top, what you just need to do is you need to add a little bit of air back in. But the idea is to get the silicone to the point where it collapses. Now, can you see it's really bubbling there? And can you see it is now collapsing? See, it's collapsing back down. And collapsing pretty much means that the majority of the air has now been taken out of that silicone. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point in the game is I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to lock off that one, which is the pipe leading to the pump. What I'm then going to do is I'm then going to very slowly start to release the pressure and let the air back in. And you can see that as I do, those air bubbles that were on the surface are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. All right, that's enough of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the valve fully off. and I'm going to turn that valve off. I'm going to take the lid, pop it on its side just there, and now got my silicone and we are ready to go. So I take this brush. I like to do this a little bit on my hand first, just to make sure that any loose bristles, like that bristle there, come out and don't end up on my actual model. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to starting from the top, paint it onto my master. And I'm just going to be doing very, very, very smooth strokes to begin with. I only want to be putting a thin layer over the majority of it. I want to be working fast, but I want to be working smooth. And I want to be working with a totally wet brush, a brush that's wet with silicone. And I want to be working from the top down, because the silicone is going to want to flow and run down it as we go. There we go. And anywhere it collects, I like to just wipe it off so it's a thin layer. So you can see on the top here it's pooling a little bit, so I'm just going to encourage it off of the point where it's pooling. Let's put a good glob into its eyes, just like that. Any overhangs you want to obviously encourage the silicone into. There we go. And the fine detail, like this honeycomb work here, this hex work, is another area where I really want to, if anything as well, like corners of the eyes, don't be afraid to use the tips of the brush to sort of push the silicone in. That's it. And I'm just going to work my way around. Edges, like the edges and corners of the mouth, don't be afraid to really get in there. If you get any bristles coming off your brush, make sure you pick those out. There we go. And I think I'm going to end up working on one side of this before the other side. But that's okay. It's on my bit of, which will get under the chin. It's on my bit of cardboard, which will make it easy enough for me to turn this whole thing around. So you can see I'm trying to work fairly quick here, just getting that silicone on and in place where it needs to be, in a fairly thin layer, capturing the detail, making sure I'm pushing the silicone into where it needs to be. Don't worry about getting the silicone on all of the flashing around here. It's more important to capture the detail that you want to capture than it is to get on the flashing at this point. If you don't know what flashing is, watch our other two tutorials that were done up until now, where we explain a lot of the terminology. Here we go, working on the other side now. Just really capturing that detail. I'm going to try and position this in a position where you can see a little bit more of what I'm doing. There we go. So I'm just making sure I get up and under anything that's going to be hard for the silicone to get to. There we go. The warmer the environment, the quicker that this silicone will go off. So the warmer the environment, the faster you are going to need to work in order to get everything done in time. All right, we are nearly there. That's it. Just making sure I've got all the details in the eyes, making sure I've got all of these lines. Whenever I see an overhang or whenever I see a crease, I try and work up into that crease to make sure that the silicone gets pushed up into the fold, if you see what I mean. There you go. Let's make sure that I'm not missing anything. There we go. And then finally, what you can do is, once you've got the main bulk of it, then maybe you can concentrate on the flashing a little bit. What I like to do is I do like to give a very thin layer around the bottom, because if anything, when you put on the shell and then you pour the silicone into the shell, it's going to act like a bit of a rubber gasket to stop the rest of the silicone that you pour in from leaking out so much. So I just like to give a thin layer just around the bottom edge, just like that. Fantastic. I feel like Bob Ross. All right, here we go. There we go. Fantastic. Looking good. And now what you want to be doing really is you can just have a little look around for any tiny little air bubbles that are trapped underneath the surface. And if you want to, you can either try and blow on it to get rid of those air bubbles, which works very well. Pops the air bubbles. Or what you can do is you can take the end of a skewer. You can just try and pop the air bubble like that. But I think, to me, this is looking pretty good. So at this moment in time, what I'm doing is I'm just looking around, looking for any big air bubbles that are coming to the surface, giving them a little pop. And we're going to wait a few minutes for this first layer to start to set before we start to move on to the other layers. But so far, this is looking good. We've got a nice even coverage. Very, very, very little air bubbles. In fact, pretty much no air bubbles that I can spot. Looking pretty healthy indeed. Okay. So, at this moment in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that pot that I've used and I'm going to bam it over there, because that's not going to be needed anymore. But of course, I am going to use it later on. Or another time. What I'll do is, once it's set, I'll just peel out the silicone and it can be used another time. That's the nice thing about getting the tubs from Smooth On, is that, or proper mixing pots, is that they are much better for the environment if you can use it again. Less waste. Okay, one of the little tips and tricks with the silicone as well is a good way to see if it's set or not is if you take your finger, which is a a gloved finger, using a latex or similar glove. if you touch the silicone and the silicone comes off onto your finger, it's not really set yet. It's not at the stage where it's sort of really to take another layer. What you want to do, and when you touch it, make sure you don't touch on where any of the detail is. Make sure you touch somewhere else, like make sure you touch the flashing or you touch the base. That doesn't really matter, because in the end product we're going to end up sort of cutting that off. So as I can see here, I'm touching it and it's still coming off on my finger right there, which means we are not ready yet. Ready soon. You kind of, when you're doing this also, you want to preempt when you're going to be ready, because it's going to take you probably about 2 or 3 minutes to mix up the new batch and suck all the air out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, at this point in time, going to prepare myself ready for the next bit of this adventure. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just pop that slightly over there, and again, this is where having everything on the little bit of cardboard or a base works really well, because right now that's quite hard to move, because of course the silicone is starting to set, so it's sticking it to this, whereas having something that glides very easily over the surface is really beneficial. Right, that's starting to toughen up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another tub right here, and I'm going to start to do the same thing again, but this time, instead of using Silk Pig White, which I'm going to put the lid on there and pop over there because you don't need it anymore, I'm actually going to start to use Silk Pig Purple, because the purple on the white should be very easy for me to see where I have and where I haven't been. So what I'm going to do is pop it on the scales. I'm going to zero the scales, and then I'm going to pour 200, 200 again. So let's do 200. All right. And 200. All right. Pretty perfect. All right, so now I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my little sticks again, one that I haven't used yet, and I'm going to start to add a little bit of Silk Pig Purple. This stuff's slightly more runny than the white for some reason. Now, the amazing thing about smooth-on products is not just their silicones, plastics, urethanes, this sort of stuff, rubbers, but actually their pigments. Their pigments, in my experience, are second to none. You need such a small amount of pigment to really get in there and do everything that you need it to do. So what I'm going to do now is scrape that off. I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to grab one of the sticks that I used previously. Here we go. There we go. Now I'm using the stick that I originally used to stir part A or B of that when I first opened it. Don't throw these things away. Use them for other jobs as much as you possibly can. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm stirring relatively fast, but I'm trying not to, I'm stirring fast but smoothly, scraping off the edges, because I'm trying not to introduce more air to this silicone. So there we go. What I'm now going to do is I'm now going to scrape that off, pop that back in there. I'm going to put it back into here, and I'm going to do the same thing again. So let's pop that on, let's close that off, and I'll make a little video for you if I can. There we go, look at that. So as you can see, as the pressure starts to build, gets to about bar 0.8, that's when it really starts to expand. If it gets too near the top, you want to allow a little bit of air back in, but I think we're about good. I'm going to allow a little bit back in, just to stop it from going over the top. And any moment now, it's going to want to collapse. There we go, it looks like it's starting to collapse. When it looks like it's starting to collapse, I'm going to turn that fully off and I'm just going to let it collapse. There we go. Bloop, 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 bloop. Collapsing back in. All right, and that's taken us 1 minute. I can see by the timer on my phone, on my recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to pop that, lock that one, and I'm going to slowly release the air back in again. I'm going to take another brush while that's releasing the air back in. I'm going to try and get rid of any bristles. Tap this, and look, that is that, because it's quite warm today, that is now fully set. There's nothing coming off there. It's still a little bit tacky, which is what you want, but there's nothing coming off onto my gloves. This is perfect, ready for the next layer. So let's release the air back in, and let's take the lid off, and let's work as quick as we can now doing our second layer. So I'm just gonna blibbity blobbies on like this. Fantastic. And make sure your brush is wet. Make sure all of your brush is covered in that silicone, because if you're brushing onto the set silicone, the dry brush has a habit of trying to pull, latching onto the dry silicone that's tacky and pulls it away from the master, whereas a wet brush will simply glide over it. And you can see right here how useful it is adding the purple pigment, because we are now just going over the top very gently. You don't want to go fast here, because again, you're going to destroy or rip off the layer of silicone underneath. But you want to be working relatively quickly just to get on. There we go, like that. Beautiful. That's it. Let's not be shy. With this, again, the good thing is with the second layer, you don't need to be so precise, because it was the first layer that really captured all the detail. So this layer is really just a thickening layer. So you're just getting it on there and adding it all the way around to thicken it up, to give that first layer a bit of support, a bit of emotional support. All right. Diddly doo doos. Okay. All right, so that is that side, and now see if I can come around the shoulder and do, I can see I've missed quite a bit of the face here. I want to do that. That's it. Let's get it on, slap it on. Let's not be too polite. There we go. Oh, I can see I've got a little bristle there. Put that in my collection. There we go, another little bristle. Just pop that in my collection. There we go. So what I like to use, it's the other reason I like to use white pigment, and I like to use bristles with brushes with black bristles. If there's any bristles come out, they stick out like a sore thumb. So it's very, very, very easy. All right, I would say that second layer is pretty good. All right, there we go. So let's just smooth on this around here. Diddly diddly. Okay. Next thing is getting the shell on, and we need to work quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first bit of shell, just like this, and I'm going to put it in place onto my master and I'm going to try and line up the holes as best I can. Get it on there like so. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put it over the edge so I can bolt that in position as easily as possible. So I'm going to take one of these, and I'm going to push up through the top. I'm going to bolt that in place. And it's best to do this while that silicone is wet, believe you me. All right. So what I'm going to do now, just pop a second one in, and you'll see what I'm doing later on in a moment when I'm able to film it. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just putting the bolts up through the base of the master, through the bottom flange of the shell, and then putting a wing nut on top. And when I turn it around, you'll see exactly what I mean by all of that. Right, so let's turn that around. Let's put that up through there. Let's do that. That one's on, fantastic. And now if I turn that around, you can now start to see what I'm talking about. All right, let's put this back piece on. All right, let's put that up through there. There we go. Okay, and then let's put this final bit on. At the moment, I'm only putting 1 or 2 bolts in each piece because I want to get it on first in position. Then I want to tighten up all the bits and pieces, okay? So last one on in position, making sure that it's not really sticking to the shell, to the master. Okay, let's put that one on. All right, fantastic. Now I'm just going to do one more in the bottom there. And this side, just here in this corner. Super. There we go. Right, now I'm going to start to put some in the sides. So I'm going to bolt the sides together at about the midway point. So I'm going to bolt this side together, just like that. There we go. I'm going to bolt this side together through the midway point. There we go. And again, because you want to do this quick, this is where it was really helpful to essentially make sure that all those holes were slightly bigger than you really need them realistically. All right, that's looking good. And now I'm going to bolt them side to side together. So I'm going to put this through there. Let's try that one. There we go. Working blind here for the sake of the camera. There we go. One on the back. Fantastic. Excellent. All right, now I can start to do the top. So be really careful when you put these on and in position that you don't touch the master. So I'm just going to slide this one slowly but surely back into position, just like that, and I'm going to get the first one just on, but I'm not going to do it up. I'm going to get it on, and I'm going to get that second one in. Once you've got the first one of these in position, it's a lot easier to then do the others and get those perfectly into position as well. All right, let's get that done. Let's get that tight. We are looking rather good. All right, so let's get the next one on and in position, which is this one just here. And now it's easier just to run that and use the one that was there in the first place as a bit of a guide to help you get in the next one. There we go. Fantastic. That's looking great. That's looking absolutely great. All right. There we go. Oh. All right, let's do one in the top through the middle to clamp those bits together. Let's do it in that bit there, just to align them. Get those clamped up together. There we go. And now we can start to pop on the other bits in as well. All right, let's get on this back piece. Very carefully sliding it in place. Careful not to touch the master. All right, can't see what I'm doing here, but I'm just putting these last few bolts in place. Lots of bolts. Right, Frankenstein's monster. There we go. All right. Whew, last one. Okay. Where is it? There we go. Some people might design these shells with keys so that the shell locks into itself like pretty perfectly. You can do that if you want. I just find that once you put the bolts in and things have sort of, as long as it's keyed to the master, once you've put the bolts in, everything's pretty much good to go anyway. Right, so now what I'm going to do is start to just bolt together. So I've bolted all the top bits to the bottom bits, but I've not bolted them to each other. So I'm just going to start to put in some bolts, bolting them to each other. Nice and easy. There we go. doing this or trying to get this on whilst the second layer of silicone is still a bit runny is beneficial, because it means that if any of this does start to, any of the shell does start to touch, let's get that one in. If any of the shell does start to touch the silicone, it's wet, so it'll just sort of like pull off. It might be a bit sticky, but if it was set, it would touch the silicone, and when you pulled it away, it would want to, the silicone would stick to the shell, and it would want to pull the silicone off the master, which at this point in the game is an absolutely disastrous thing to do. Now I've come across one hole here that isn't big enough. So what I'm going to do at this point in time, a little bit of a trick and a tip for you, actually, is you could either drill it out to make it larger, or what you can do is just get a heat gun and I'm just going to blast the heat gun on that hole for a couple of seconds. Say a couple of seconds, more like 5 seconds really, and then after that should be able to get it through, which I've just done. It's going to be hard to get out again the other end, but that's future Tom's problem, not my problem. Right, poor old future Tom. Sucks to be him. All right, a couple more of these, one at the top on this side. All right, and one at the bottom in the middle, or the front, sorry. There you go. Do that up nice and tight. Close some of these gaps. How are we looking? One probably just there. You know, as a rule of, I mean, we've made way more holes here than we're going to need, right? But I like to put lots and lots of holes, so it gives you options, right? Options as far as where you might want to put things. If you find that one isn't going through, if you find that the holes are very slightly misaligned, what you can do is just loosen up the bolts around it to give yourself that wiggle room to then basically be able to slide the bolt through, and then you can tighten everything up again. So what I'm doing is I'm not going to put every single one of them in, because quite frankly, in my experience, you don't need to. There's a lot of people that will say, oh yes you do, belt and braces. If you want to go down that route, go down that route. I don't think you need to. What I'm really doing is I'm looking at the gaps between the flanges, and anywhere where the gap is slightly big, I'm popping in a bolt to basically screw it in and close up that gap a little bit. And I'm only hand tightening it, and you'll see why I'm only hand tightening it in a moment. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one in the front here at the bottom. There we go. At this point in time, because everything's sort of locked in place and it should all be screwed and locked on tight to the master, you can pretty much sort of like, as long as you don't throw it about the room, you can pretty much sort of move it around by the shell and everything will stay where it's supposed to sort of stay, really. I like to have a bolt in the bottom and a bolt in the top of each bit of flange. So you can see here, bolt in the bottom, bolt in the top, bolt in the bottom, bolt in the top, bolt in the bottom, bolt in the top, bolt in the bottom, bolt in the top. It's a nice, it's a lovely British accent for you. Right. Bickety bam. And I think, as very strange people say, Bob's your uncle. that is it. You're good. You're golden. So what we're going to do now is we're going to now mix up silicone and we're going to pour it straight into here. But Tom, you idiot, it's just going to seep out all of these gaps. I hear you cry. Yeah, you're right. It probably will. Now, sometimes I just say, hell with it. Let's just go for it. It's only got a 6-minute pot life. So if it starts to seep out the gaps, so be it. And there might be a little bit of wastage, but eventually it'll set and eventually it will fill up. And also sometimes the gaps do allow the air to release. Nice thing about it seeping out the gaps as well is if it's seeping up the gaps here, then you know that the silicone's only up to there. If it's seeping out the gaps here, you know the silicone has been filled here. It's very hard to know how much of it is filled. Well, it would be if it wasn't for the fact that me and Phil thought about this when we were doing this tutorial. And what we thought is, let's print some of the shell in transparent FDM filament. So you can see that you've got transparent bits here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and use a silk pig. Like I'm going to try and use silk pig green, which against the purple should be very easy to spot. And when we pour it in, hopefully we should be able to see at what level the green is at as it slowly but surely fills all the way up. That's the premise anyway. In reality, we'll see what happens. And a lot of the time, in fact, most of the time, I don't bother printing it in transparent filament. I just sort of print it in normal black or blue or any color that's cheap and available. These things don't have to look pretty. They just have to work. So here we are at this stage in the game. We have our silk pigs. In fact, let's move that over to there because we don't need that anymore. We have our master that has its shell on. To stop the silicone from leaking out of the gaps, I'm now going to plug in my trusty glue gun that I mentioned earlier. And what we're going to do is when that's nice and hot, is we're then basically going to use the hot glue down each gap to stop it from leaking out. At this point in time, while that's heating up, good idea is to take your gloves off, put those somewhere, and have a little bit of a tidy up at this stage in the game. So what I'm going to do is put those over there. I don't really need the brushes anymore, so brushes I can get rid of. Tell you what, for the moment, let's put them into one of these here. There we go. What do I need? I will need the green silk pig, and I'm going to need one of these large tubs. Now, because I've done those two capturing layers first, so the actual layers of silicone that are sort of touching the master have been degassed. I don't really need to degas the rest of the silicone that I'm going to be mixing up. This stuff's very runny as well. It's got a very low viscosity, so the big air bubbles tend to come to the surface anyway. But just for belts and braces, I think I am going to degas as much as possible. So I'm going to using these big tubs, and what I've found is when you degas this silicone, it tends to want to double in volume before it collapses. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to... So I can see that you can fit 2,000 mils into this tub. So what I'm going to do is half of 2,000 is 1,000, half of that's 500. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to probably pour in the part B into this tub till I get to about 500, and I'm going to see what that measurement is in weight, and then I'm going to pour the same weight in of the part A. So here we go. Let's put on some new gloves, and I'm only going to pour the part B for the moment because I'm waiting for this glue gun to heat up a little bit so that we can use it first. All right, so let's take the part B, Let's make sure those scales are zeroed. Yeah. And then let's start to pour until I get to about the 500 ml mark, which is about there. And I can see that at 500 mils, we are at about 500 grams. Who would have guessed? Other than the metric system. So, yeah, basically, what I want to do there is I'll keep that in there, and I want to remember that's about 500 grams. And when I pour the part A, I want to pour in another 500 and then mix in a little bit of my Silk Pig Green. Okay, so let's take those off. Bam them down there. Right, here we go. Is this hot? Don't do this at home, kids. So let's start to working from the top down, and I'll try and direct this more so you can see it. I should have used glue gun sticks that had a colour to them, like black or something. But what I'm just doing is I'm just basically running down the edge here, and I'm putting a bead of hot glue all the way down the edge to seal it up, just like that. What I can then do is use one of these to spread it on, like you're siliconing your like if you've ever used silicone in a shower or a bath or something like this, plumbing. But don't do it with don't lick your finger and do it, because it's hot. Don't be an idiot all your life. As I often get told. There we go. All the way down. All the way like that. There we go. Beautiful. There we go. Lovely. That's one done. And then let's go across. Just like that. There we go. Doesn't have to be neat, because what we're going to do is at the end, we're going to peel all of this off anyway. So I'm just going all the way down the back. All the way down. There we go. There we go. I love how stringy hot glue is. I'm not going to bother doing the very bottom, because the bottom I'd coated in silicone anyway. So when the shell clamped onto the bottom, that silicone that was set and rubberized should have acted a little bit like a gasket to stop the bottom from leaking anyway. Whereas the other joints don't have that. There we go. Let's spread that on. And just for your, just to save you boredom and for the sake of entertainment, I may speed up this in the video so you don't have to watch me do every single one of these, because it is TDS. All right, so those are now all sealed. Let's pop that over there. Let's turn this back around. There you go. You can easily see it. Fantastic. Looking good. Right, time to pour this silicone. So let's put up a couple of the old love gloves back on. All right. Keep it safe, kids. Keep it wrapped. All right. And time to add the part B, the part A to this. So who can remember how much I poured? 700, yeah? Just trying to catch you out. It's 500. So I'm going to add 500 A. All right. So add 500 part A. Bangarang. Who remembers that? Right, there we go. Pop that in there. Let's get a little bit of our silk piglet green. There you go. As I said, this stuff is incredibly strong. So let's pop that in there. Give that a little mix around. Look at that. Looks minty fresh. I do somewhere around here have a bit of silk pig black. Once upon a rainbow. Tempted to use that because that would be very easy to see where it's filled up to. All right, let's pop that there. Let's get this one here that I haven't used yet, that was used for stirring the part A or B at the very beginning. Just trying to think where that silk pig black's gone to. Have a look. I'll have a look for it in a minute. Do you know what? I'm going to put in a little bit more of this silk pig green, just because I want it to really, really, really show up underneath. There we go. All right, let's put that in there. Let's give this a good stir. Working it in from the sides. There we go. Scrape it off. All right. Let's pop that in there. Let's pop that in there. Let's pop the lid on here. And bickety bam. Fantastic. All right, so this stuff's starting to expand as per norm. And then once we get to about approaching 1 bar, it'll start to collapse. It's reaching the top, so I'm just going to add a little bit of air just to stop it from really reaching the top. Any moment now it will start collapsing. And it's collapsing. Blub, 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 blub. All right, so I'm going to pour this in the top, and when I pour it in, see how it flows down the channels and see how it starts to fill up from the bottom. That's the theory. Start to slowly release the air back in. Adjust trousers. Smash in. All right. Let's take this. Now I always like to pour in one ear and let the air come out the other ear. So I'm going to try and pour in this ear. So that we can let it come out of the other ear. So I don't know if you can see that very easily. You can see it's all sort of flowing down on one side. And I can already tell it's going to take quite a few of these to get this done. So let's start to prep and get ready number 2. So if I turn this around, you can sort of see that the green is starting to fill up this bottom bit right here, and you can see that it's starting to ooze just here, and it's going to make its way around. It's going to settle all the way around the bottom, which is exactly what we want it to do. We want it just to run all the way down to the bottom. So let's start mixing up batch number 2. Just going to pop that on there. $500. $500. And do you know what? I'm just going to come around, grab some different pigment. Here you go, I've got some Silk Pig blood here. Some Silk Pig blood and some Silk Pig black. And that's what I'm going to mix in this time. So let's do the black, so we can hopefully really see what that pigment's up to. Let's mix that in. There we go. Let's pop that in there. Okay. And then let's get a new mixing stick. Thank you, Smooth On. Thank you, Bentley. Let's mix this in. I know I'm using the same tub as before. It's just to save on tubs. You can only do that really twice in a row. Don't want to do it more than twice in a row because the previous silicone will set. It's extremely bad practice doing that, actually. But do as I say, not as I do. All right, there we go. Let's pop it in there, suck all the air out again. There we go. Yeah, you can see where it's leveled off. It's leveled off to about there. So we've got quite a few more of these to go before we end up filling this. What I might do is start to double up. So I'll get another tub while the air is being pulled out of that. Start to pour the next one. All right. Zero that. $500. Let's turn that off. Slowly let the air in. Add 500 of this. No, hold on. I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to pour this one first. Impatience getting the better of me. Let's use that stirry stick just to scrape the last remnants of silicone out. There we go. Doesn't matter if you get a bit of silicone on the outside. Peels off very easily once it's set. All right, how are we doing? So it's slowly but surely filling up. Looking good. You can tip it as well to encourage the flow, which is always a good idea. All right, time to do the next one. Okay, let's grab a little bit more of... Oh, let's grab some more of those sticks. Would be good. And to prove that they really are barbecue skewers, there you go. Right, let's add some more black into there. Scrape that off, put it into there. Start to give it a mix. Get right to the bottom, right to the sides. Scrape it off. Let's bang it on the top. Suck out the air. How are we doing? So we're about up to there, I would say. Looking at the height, filled up to about there. So we're slowly but surely getting there. Further up we go, the less it will take. if you look right down the bottom, down the channels, sometimes you can see where it's filled up to down the channels, but at the moment I can't. All right, there you go. That one's good. Air back in. Air out. Let's pour it in. Right, time to mix up the next one. Zero that. $500. Another 500 grams. As I say, 500 is just what works best for these particular tubs. If you've got bigger tubs or smaller tubs, then adjust accordingly. Scrape that off, pop it in there, and grab the same stirrer as last time, because it's not been that long since my last pour. See, is it leaking anywhere? Tiny little leak you can see just down there, but because I can feel that green, I can feel it's already firm and hard. Anywhere it's leaking would have sealed itself by now, so that is great. Get it off the sides, working it all the way around. Get it off the bottom. There we go. That'll do nicely. In we go, suck out the air. And this time, just to even things up a little bit more, what I might do is I might pour it in the other side and the other ear, just to get a bit more flow down to this left hand side. Find a clean knuckle to put my glasses back on my face. All right, that's now collapsed. There we go. All right, I'm going to pour this in the other side this time. Lovely. There. All right, let's pop that over there. All right, what I might do now, I think, is carry on filling this up. Fill, and I'm just going to fast forward this bit, put it in fast motion so that you can see things happen a little bit more quickly rather than having to bear with me for all of this. So what I'm doing now is, now that I've filled it up, what I like to do is undo and separate the edges a little bit, just to release any last little bits of air that are sort of like trapped in there. Just prise them apart just a millimetre or so, just so that if there is any air in there at all, the air can come out. And then I'll do them back up again. I'm just going to top up the ears, making sure that the silicone comes right to the top of the mould. That is quite important. Right to the top. There we go. And the idea is that in 30 minutes time, that should be ready to demold. Gloves off. Job's a good one.
A few moments later.
All right, so the silicone has now pretty much set. If we poke it on top and poke it all around, we can sort of feel that it's rubberized now. There you go. So We were working in a bit of a messy area, so the first thing that we need to do really is clean it up. So what I like to do is just basically, if I've got a plastic tablecloth like I'm working with right now, I just like to pull it back to get rid of any drips of anything that have managed to soak through or that have managed to go onto the surface. So let's move that over there. Here we go. Bit of a tear in the cloth there, that doesn't matter. Shift that over. Clear all that out the way. So now we've got a nice clean area to work on. So, tools that I'm going to need for this bit. It's a hammer, a couple of flathead screwdrivers, a few of these little barbecue skewers, a sort of wallpaper scraper or some sort of thin device of some kind, and a scalpel. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to basically take out all of these bolts, and as I do that, I'm just going to put them back where they need to be, like so. If once you've undone it, they don't pull out that easy, what you can do is either use the hammer or use a combination. So for instance, this one's not coming out that easy. So use the hammer just to push it through. Try and pull it out the other side. Just like that. There we go. If there's any silicone on the bolt, pull the silicone off. Just peel the silicone off before you put the bolt back. Once I've removed all the bolts from the top 4 sections, what I then like to do is start to just prise them apart a little bit. And I do that by just sticking the screwdriver in the gap. Make sure you don't stick it in and pierce the silicone. Stick the screwdriver in the back and then slowly but surely stick sticks in like that, just to work your way down. And slowly but surely, very slowly but surely, release the bit. And it's better to prise it off, and it's better to release it where the actual flange is. So don't try and prise it off in the middle because it may snap the shell. Try and prise it off at the bottom, just like that. There we go. And I'll prise and release it this side as well. And you can hear it going. There we go. And you can see what we have underneath. It's this lovely layer of silicone. So let's pop that there. Any silicone that's stuck to the outside of it, we can peel it off. Pop over there, and let's carry on going. Now, one little tip for you is what you might want to do is once you've got a bit removed like that, you might want to actually put it back on, if you can get it back on. And that what you might want to do is you might want to bolt it back on in place, so that then you can use it bolted in place as a solid to be able to use leverage against to prise off the other pieces. Let's do this one. So let's stick the screwdriver in the top. If the screwdriver's too thick and doesn't work, something thinner like that is better to sort of break that to break that seal. Right, let's pop one in there. Let's pop one in there. Let's pop one in there. So you can see, if I turn it around, that they're all in that gap just there. And then finally, I'm going to put that right down to the very bottom. Push it in, not too far, and just start to prise that one off. There we go. Just like that. This flange, this bit here, will eventually trim off. See what we're doing in a second. All right, next one. It's good to see how the front goes. Let's pop that in there. Let's turn it around so that you can see. There we go. Let's pop that in there. Let's pop that in there. Let's open that up a little bit more. Let's pop that one just in there. There we go. There we go. And now I'm actually also going to prise it up from the bottom to pull it away like that. Make sure you're gentle-ish so that you don't. There we go, big reveal. And because we sprayed the inside of those with release agent earlier on, makes it just that little bit easier. Now with this last one, I can't prise it off from the sides, so I'm going to have to prise it off using the bottom one as a bit of leverage. So that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my thing first, my scraper, and I'm just going to get the scraper in there a little bit just to break the tension, to ease the two apart. Again, you never want to push this so far in that it damages the silicone. You only want to push it a little bit of the way in. That's it. And then let's pop that in just there. Just pop that in. And then start to do it around the sides. Just here. And just in there. Like that. Now I'm not going to be able to, because of the shape of the ear, I'm not going to be able to put it off sideways. I'm going to have to pull it off forwards. So the best thing that I can do here is try to get in underneath the front and prise up like that. So get in underneath the front and prise up. That's it. There we go. And I can sort of hear and feel it go. There we go. Looking good. Looking very nice. What we can do at this moment in time is we can take that scalpel. We can start to just trim off what we can see. So if I just put the scalpel along like that, I'm just going to run the scalpel around the edge here. There we go. Shaving off that flange. I'm going to shave off this bit here as well. Shave it off. Shavey, shavey, shavey. All right, there we go. Shave it off. All right. There we go, all the way down. Bickety bam. That'll do. Say shave the sides off. In fact, I'll shave the top around here off as well, actually. So let's get in there, and then it doesn't have to be neat. There we go. Start to just cut away this bit around the top. There we go. Fantastic. And then let's shave that off. Okay. And that glue, you can see the glue that we glued on with the glue gun to stop everything from coming out. Basically, it just pulls straight off, just peels away really easily. Right, let's shave off this side. Okay, just like that. And then let's shave around the top. Just around here. I could use scissors for this bit, but doesn't really matter. There we go. Fantastic. All right. So, rinse and repeat for the bottom half, really. It's funny. You can see all the layer lines. So anything that was on the inside of the shell, all of those sort of like layer lines from printing it in with a 1mm nozzle in draft mode, which will mean something to you if you've ever done 3D printing. If you've not done 3D printing, you won't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, you can sort of see all of those lovely layer lines on the inside, which is that sort of that lined texture that you're seeing. But it's on the outside of the silicone. That's not the detail we need to capture, so it just doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter to us at all. Let's tip it back a little bit just to get these bottom ones out. Oh, wrong one. You know, some of you might want to wear gloves for doing this bit, because if you've got any silicone that hasn't properly set or anything that was still a bit sticky, any residues lying around, your hands will get covered in it. And when you come to do the next bit, you don't, which involves basically touching the inside of the silicone, the bit with all the detail on it, you don't want to get sticky stuff on it, because that's the bit you got to keep looking precious. So what I'm going to do is, after I take off all the bits of shell, you're going to see that I'm going to cover it in baby powder, talcum powder, and then I'm going to go probably wash my hands. Or I might wash my hands before the baby powder bit. I find that when you put in these bolts, one of the best things to do is put the bolts up from the bottom. First of all, it means that on the very bottom layer, if you do that, this one's going to be tough. On the very bottom layer, if you do that, it means that it's all sitting on just the bolt head rather than sitting on the wing nut, which is a little bit flatter and easier, but also it's easier to then undo the nuts. And it's very typical that I would start that sentence just at the perfect moment that I come across one that's really, really in tight and difficult. So what I'm going to do is, I think, grab something that's going to give me a little bit of leverage. I mean, really, the sensible thing for me to do would be to grab a spanner, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab some pliers because they were closer and easier to get to. So you're going to make me regret my choice now. There we go. There we have it. It's coming. Right. The reason I had to do that rather than just spin the wing nut is because on that particular bolt, a bit of a design flaw is these keys that I put in came out so far that it got in the way of the wing nut, so I couldn't turn the wing nut. It's one small design flaw, one small mistake that I made with this particular mould. I hope you do better than I do. Right, I think those are all out. So what I'm going to do is, I can see, if you look at it side on, can you see that the front ones are bigger than the back ones? That means the front one has more, or the front ones have more contact area, right? Which means they're going to be harder to remove than the back ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by removing the front ones while I've got the leverage of the back ones to prise off of. The last one is always the hardest to remove. So I want the last one to be one of the easier two. Otherwise I'm going to make a bit of a nightmare for myself. So let's start to work our way in just here. Let's pop that in, and whenever I pop it in, I do like to go down a lot of the time rather than going in, because if you go in and you slip, you can end up stabbing and piercing through the silicone. Whereas at least if you go down, you're probably not gonna hit anything that you don't want to hit. You can do a few things as well. You can either put it in and prise it, or you can put it in and turn it, which also gives it also prises it apart, gives it a good bit of leverage. Okay. Let's try the front. Let's get in there with the thin one first. There we go. Now let's get in there with the screwdriver, and that's coming away very easily. Very easily. And you can see the lovely green level that we put in first, and where the green took it up to. Very nice. Very pretty. Right. Let's try and leverage off this one. Let's put that in there. There we go. And then let's... There we go. Crack that one in there. All right. That one's come away nice and easy as well. There we go. Now, I don't know if you can spot it, but I can spot a small little air bubble trapped in the top of where that lug was. So if you think about it, when I poured it where that lug was, which is just on the inside of here, where that key was, sorry, that keys the silicone into the shell. Obviously, there's a bit of trapped air in the top there. That's not massively important, but when you spot things like this, you know that it might have been worth, when you were pouring in the silicone, pouring it around and rotating it around a little bit more to allow the air to release and allow that to fill up with silicone. But it's not going to affect the end mould. It's just a small little thing. A small little thing. Right. Oh, let's turn it around so we can see the back. Stay. All right. Let's put that in. Come on. There we go. Let's pop. Let's peel off some of that glue gun glue. Ugh. Disgusting. There you go. Let's pop that in there. And then let's just and again, following all the steps that that we taught you, that has now come off very easily. Starting to paint a bit of a picture here. Right, last one. Now, one of the things you can do is put another piece next to it back on and bolt it to the base, or bolt it in position. You don't want to bolt it to that one because that's the one you want to remove. I'm going to try and remove it without doing that, which is really just a case of prising it off the bottom instead of anywhere else. But you want to be careful not to shatter the master when you do this. So I'm just going to work this scraper, as you can see, into that gap around the bottom a little bit to release the tension. I'm going to stick my screwdriver in and I'm going to turn it so that it pulls it away from. Now, something else that I'm going to do. See how this sort of weird flange of silicone is stuck to that? Well, it's not helping. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work my fingers along and pull it away a little bit. That's it. Now I'm going to go and stick it in again. And it is coming away, but it's wanting to pull the silicone with it. So I'm just going to try and work this corner as well. So let's stick that in the bottom. Oh, tearing up all the paper here that I'm working on, but that doesn't matter. Again, I'm going to take that weird flange of silicone. I'm just going to pull it away. That's it. Stick the screwdriver in. Start to pull it away. Just like that. Told you the last one's the most difficult. I never lie to you. Right, here we go. Fingers underneath. And the big reveal. Scud da da da. Right. So, let's trim this up. Get rid of all these weird flanges off the sides. No, you can't really see this one that I'm doing. That's the other side of the head. But you'll have to trust me when I tell you that I'm doing the same thing that I've done to all the rest of it so far. So I'm just running that sharp scalpel blade around the edge and I'm just trimming off those bits of flange. It's a nice word, isn't it? Flange. Right. There we go. Whew. Try not to cut yourself. How are we doing? We've got one more on this side, yeah. Normally I'd be doing this as in a much more comfortable position, but I'm just doing it in this rather awkward way so that you can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to take the scalpel and I'm basically going to run around the outside edge just like this, taking the scalpel into the corner all the way around the outside, and I'm going to start this way as well, all the way around the outside, round the bottom, just like that, so that then I can remove any of that bottom bit. There we go. So now I've got a nice clean bottom, and it's very important to have a nice clean bottom. In fact, that is the AE mantra, the Alter Ego Studios catchphrase: no dirty bottoms. All right, that's what I tell Phil daily. Go and clean your bottom before we get to work. All right, so there we have it. Ooh, boom shakalaka. Our lovely silicone all over. Right, next thing we want to do is we want to take some baby powder, some talcum powder. Cheap stuff will do. Doesn't have to be branded. You know who I'm talking about. The old J&J. And just give it a little tinkle sprinkle all over. Just take one of these brushes. Just going to start to sort of brush it in, really. There we go. Let's tilt it on its side. What this talcum powder is going to do is when we pull it off the mould, we're going to be pulling it off sort of inside out. So we're going to be peeling it inside out from the bottom over itself. And this stops the silicone from gripping onto itself. And I'll tell you, the hardest bit to get the silicone over is always going to be the chin and the nose. It's where it sticks out, because it's going from a very thin bit, the neck, to a very thick bit over the chin. So you've got to pull the thin neck over the wide chin. It's always the hardest bit. But we'll see how we get on. The thinner you design the silicone to be, so the thinner the gap between the shell and the master, the easier it is and the more stretch there is. But potentially the more risk there is of air bubbles, because it's harder to get the silicone to flow where it needs to go to. Doing this work is constant trade-offs. Like with silicone rubber or like urethane rubber. It's like there's almost no way to have the best silicone rubber in the world or urethane rubber in the world would be something that was really runny and really low viscosity, but then hardened to be about 30-40 Shore hardness, like a really tough rubber. But unfortunately, the trade-off chemically is that you just can't do that, apparently, from what I understand, from what the experts tell me. I'm not an expert in making these chemicals, just a bit of an expert at using them. But yeah, if anyone's out there from Smooth On listening to this and you haven't been bored senseless yet, then yeah, make it so. All right. Woo! Christ almighty. So here we have our mould ready for demoulding now. Whew. So next thing we have to do is turn it upside down. Well, actually there's one of a few ways of doing this. You can either turn it upside down and have something, because of course you've got two delicate ears here, so you don't just want to turn it upside down and peel it off pushing down, because it'll crush the ears. So what you want is to have something that's like there, like a bit of wood or something that's sort of like in between these two ears, resting on the table, so that when you push down, the force goes onto the top of the head and it doesn't wreck the ears. Alternatively, the other thing that you can do is you can start to get the bottom folded up like this, transfer it to the floor, put your feet on the outside flange of the master, and then just basically try and pull up with all your might. But as you can see, as we're now pulling off and up, you're starting to see the detail that's been captured in this mould. So what am I going to do? I think I'm going to attempt to put it on the floor and pull is what I'm going to attempt to do. All right. See if I feel brave. All right. Let's put him down here like this. Let's put my feet on either side like that. And I'm going to pull up, and the hard bit, let's push it forwards a little bit like that. There we go. The hard bit is going to be getting this bit up and over the chin. Whew. All right, so it's off. Here it is, off and inside out. One quick cursory look to see if I can spot many bubbles, which I can't, which is a good thing. And then I'm going to turn it back the right way round. Let's move him out the way. Let's turn this back the right way round. All right, there we go. Let's put him back on the table. Whew. That was hard work. Okay, so I've pulled it off in more ways than one. Covered in talc. Next thing we need to do is we need to start to basically reassemble the shell. So I'm going to start by assembling the back bits of the shell together, and then I'm going to move on to the front. So let's just pop this guy over here for the moment, out the way. And let's start to take the back pieces of the shell and start to put those together. So that is that piece, and let's see which pieces. I think it's that piece and that piece. Yes, those are the back bits of the shell. So this bit should be relatively easy, and you don't need a lot of bolts for this. It just has to be basically bolted together to hold everything in place. So I'm going to bolt those together. There we go. Bolt those together. There we go. Let's take the back bits of the head. That's one back bit of the head. That's the other back bit of the head. There we go. Let's start to pop those in place. Oh. Pop one up through there. Get rid of some of this glue gun glue. Again, should be relatively quick. Say relatively quick compared to everything else that we've done so far on this video that's now approaching 3 hours. But look, if you want to get this sort of thing done properly, there are no shortcuts. That's not true. There's a lot of shortcuts actually, but shortcuts mean risk. So I suppose if you want to get it done properly, there aren't shortcuts. All right. Skiddly dee 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 dee. How are we doing? All right, so let's lay that down like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this where it needs to be, where it sort of naturally sits. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, making sure I've got clean hands, I'm just going to start to push. I'm going to start to push the bits and pieces in where they naturally sit. So I'm going to push everything in those grooves basically. Now what you might want to do it's working out all right for the moment, is you can very slightly loosen those bolts in order to push everything in. But everything actually, because it's such a brilliantly designed shell that I've done, actually everything's fitting in quite nicely. Do you know what? I really shouldn't say that until the fat lady has sung. All right. That did go in, and it's all sort of sitting where it should be sitting quite nicely indeed. So now what we do is we move on to the front. So let's get rid of some of that funky glue gun glue that's just sitting on the sides, begging to be peeled off. There we go. Let's put that in place just there. If I can turn it around. There you go, that in place just there. Let's put a little bolt through, like so. There you go. Let's put another bolt through, like so. Next face bit. Let's pop that one on. All right. Going to peel off some more of this glue gun glue that's begging to be peeled off. Look at that. Oh, satisfying. Oh, lovely. It's like pulling off masking tape, you know what I mean, when it all comes off in one lovely stream. It's very satisfying. Is that just me, or do you guys think that as well? Answers on a postcard, please. Or just help us out by writing something in the comments. All right. So make sure that it's all pushed in, making sure on the inside that the nose is pushed in, all those nodes, the keys. They are keys. I've always wanted to call them nodes, but they are keys. It's the official terminology for it. Right, okay, that's looking very good. Feeling very good. This one. Let's pull off some of that glue gun glue. Oh, look at that. Whoa. There we go. Nearly there, folks. A few more bolts to do, and we're golden. Just make sure those little keys are pushed in. Make sure the channels around the front and the back are all pushed into place where they need to be. All right, there we go. So that is now done. So the shell's back together. I'm just gonna, one last time, make sure that all the keys are pushed into place. Make sure all the channels, you can tell if it's not pushed in because there'll be like quite a little bit of bounce behind it. But if you push it and it feels fairly firm, then it means that you're pushing it essentially up against the wall of the shell, which is how it is supposed to be, all the way around like that. And if we look on the inside, there you go. You can see that you've got your mould there, looking pretty decent. All right, guys, so that is that mould done. That is that part of the tutorial, how to make the mould, or the matrix mould, or how to pour it for your cowl. And then in the next part of the tutorial, I think we'll be going over how to make a basic rotocaster, and then after that, how to then cast your own cowl. Thank you very much, guys, for paying attention. Thanks for bearing with, and we'll see you next time.